Hey, good morning, guys. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a good weekend. First of all, I want to thank everyone for who came to Randy's service or helped out with it, and then everyone who was close with Randy along the way. You guys are our family, so thanks again for everything. Speaking of which, we're we're about to jump into Genesis 29 and 30. And I'm gonna probably, I love this story because we get to drop a Randy quote in here. So if you guys have never heard an F bomb in a Bible study before, I apologize ahead of time if your kids are listening to this one, but it seems kind of fitting. So let's see. Last week we left off, Jacob, he stole his brother's blessing, and then now he's left and he's going to find a wife. Um, Big long trek back to his homeland essentially, so he's not marrying the Canaanites, the same as Isaac his father did. And so he gets kind of halfway and the Lord comes to seize him in his dreams. And so I'm looking at right here and it says Jacob made a vow saying, if God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I will return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God, and this stone I have set up as a pillar. So that's the very end. He said, and I will pillar to God's house, and all of that you give me, I will give you a tenth. So he sets up his tithe. He makes a promise to God. He knows that God's on the journey with him. Really important. We need to know that God's on our journey with us. Are we on our path or are we on God's path? And that's a question we need to ask ourselves every single day. So let's jump in it. This is actually take 3 of Genesis 29 and 30. And it says, then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds, my brothers, where are you from? We're from Haran, they replied. He said to them, do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson? Yes, we know him, they answered. Then Jacob asked them, is he well? Well, yes, he is, they said. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Look, he said, the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture. We can't, they replied, until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep. While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel's daughter of his uncle Laban and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah. So she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him, you are my own flesh and blood. So remember Isaac, his servant went to find him a wife, Rebekah. Same deal, went to the well. But Jacob went with nothing. And when you don't bring the riches and the gold, you don't really show that you are wealthy, even though he had it. So he kind of had to go on his own accord, his own wit. But he still, God has blessed the journey and he's met the right person. So after Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be. Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me. So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her. So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob. And Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Laban replied, "It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, then we will give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel to be his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. So, Jacob arrives, he works 7 years, falls in love with Rachel, but she's a younger one. Laban cuts the deal with him, but then, pretty much kind of gets him drunk. Wedding night, it's dark, they didn't have electricity, slips in the oldest daughter, and then when Jacob calls him on it, she wants another 7 year. He says, "Oh, you can have my younger one too, but it's tradition. There's a loophole. So now we got tradition of oldest daughter, but if you want the younger one too, you can have her. You owe me another 7 years." So now he's got 14 years of labor for both the daughters, which kind of is like, remember Jacob stole Esau's, he stole his birthright, traded him for soup. Remember, Esau was hungry. He came in. He's like, what's my birthright to me? So he's kind of been shisty on that end. He's really cunning. And then his mom, Rebecca, when she was promised God's blessing, she got, and then she convinced Jacob to steal Esau's blessing as the oldest. And so he's kind of not weaseled, but finagled his way in on some shrewd dealings with his brother, with his dad, and that's kind of why he's out there. Well, now Laban, who was Rebecca's brother, so it's his mom's brother, he got him. He got him on 14 years of labor for his daughters, and now someone else is going to take care of his daughters, but he got this free labor out of it. So Randy, my father-in-law, who you guys know, he used to say, "Don't fuck with a fucker, you're going to get fucked." So Jacob is down the bloodline of this. Laban comes from the OG, and he got him. So this is kind of how their relationship starts as a son-in-law. So he does another 7 years. He gets Rachel. And it says, when the Lord saw that Leah, so the oldest, was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said, "It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now." She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too." So she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "Now at least my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons." So his name was Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, "This time I will praise the Lord." So she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." Jacob became angry with her and said, "Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having the children?" Then she said, "Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her." Remember Sarah did that with Abraham? So it's really, really hard for us to wait on the Lord. Sometimes we think that we can do it ourselves, especially when she's got this sibling rivalry going with her older sister, who's had 4 kids by now. And then, giving a boy to a son to his father was a great honor. And then it was always God's blessing for a woman to have a child. So you got some sibling rivalry here. And Jacob, he's caught in the middle of it, and they're both kind of competing for him, which is a good thing, but it sounds like he's dealing with a lot of women, and it's frustrating for him too. So Rachel's impatient, gives her servant, and then that's how they start. But remember, 1,000-foot view or higher, right? Heaven view of this. God has promised Abraham, Isaac, Jacob that their descendants are going to cover the land. So this is all part of God's plan as well. So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said, God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son. Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said, I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won. So she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, what a good fortune. So she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, how happy I am. The women will call me happy. So she named him Asher. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought. So Reuben's still a kid, right? Because he's working on the 7 years, right? And all this is happening during his second 7-year term. So what, Reuben was the first, so he's the oldest. He's probably 5-6 years old. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah, so they're aunts, right? So Rachel is essentially Reuben's aunt, said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. So mandrakes, culturally in the time, they were considered like an aphrodisiac. They were supposed to help with conception. And so this is kind of like a love-making tea plant that Rachel wants, because there's still that rivalry going on. So give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take away my son's mandrakes too? Very well, Rachel said. He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes. So she's like, you can have him for one night, but I'm going to get all the aphrodisiac stuff and get it all ready. So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him. You must sleep with me, she said. I have hired you with my son's mandrakes. So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a 5th son. Then Leah said, God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband. So she named him Issachar. So the plan kind of backfired for Rachel. Every time we try to manipulate something God's doing, it just backfires. So she thought she traded one night with Jacob for some plants that are supposed to work, right? Like a magic pill. But that one night that she traded, Leah gets pregnant anyway, and it was the opposite of what she wanted to happen. So again, we need to not manipulate our situations and just rely on God's purpose and God's timing. So let's see. Issachar, Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a 6th son. Then Leah said, God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. Sometime after she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. So God doesn't forget us. In the scripture, in the text, it says he remembered. But when it says he remembered us or remembered someone, it never forgot us. It just means something good's about to happen and the timing's near for that. So God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. So this is Rachel's first real one. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said, God has taken away my disgrace. She named him Joseph and said, may the Lord add to me another son. So they made a whole bunch of boys and a girl, and that was part of their rivalry, but that was also God's plan too. God uses our strengths and weaknesses to accomplish his kingdom's purpose. So we saw how that worked out, and now Jacob's got a whole bunch of kids running around. After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban, send me on my way so I can go back to my homeland. Give me my wives and children for whom I have served you, and I will be on my way. You know how much work I have done for you." But Laban said to him, "If I have found favor in your eyes, please stay. I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." He added, "Name your wages and I will pay them." Jacob said to him, you remember they're both shrewd, right? So they have this like father-son thing, but they're always kind of trying to get the upper hand on each other. Yeah, Jacob got both of his daughters, but now um, Laban's flock's increasing and he's making more money because Jacob's blessed by the Lord, so he doesn't want him to leave. Jacob said to him, "You know how I have worked for you and how your livestock has fared under my care. The little you had before I came has increased greatly, and the Lord has blessed you wherever I have been. But now, when I do something for my but now, when may I do something for my old household?" Always a family thing, right? Family business. He wants to go off and do his own. The other one's like, stay, stay, stay. I'll beg you, or I'll offer you things, kind of dangling the carrot. He says, "What shall I give you?" "Don't give me anything," Jacob replied. "But if you will do this one thing for me, I will go on tending your flocks and watching over them. Let me go through all of your flocks today and remove from them every speckled or spotted sheep, every dark-colored lamb, and every spotted or speckled goat. They will be my wages, and my honesty will testify for me in the future. Whenever you check on my wages, you have paid me. Any goat in my possession that is not speckled or not spotted, or any lamb that is not dark-colored will be considered stolen." So it's kind of separating them. One's going to have like a purebred, and the other one's going to have, the not purebred. "Agreed," said Laban. "Let it be as you have said." So that same day, he removed all the male goats that were streaked or spotted, and all the speckled or spotted female goats, all that had white on them, and all the dark-colored lambs, and he placed them in the care of his sons. Then he put a 3-day journey between himself and Jacob, while Jacob continued to tend the rest of Laban's flocks. Well, Jacob, however, took fresh-cut branches from a poplar, almond, and plane trees and made white stripes on them by peeling the bark and exposing the white inner wood of the branches. Then he placed and peeled branches in all the watering troughs so that they would be directly in front of the flocks when they came to drink. When the flocks were in heat and came to drink, they made it in front of the branches and bore young that were streaked or speckled or spotted. Jacob set apart the young of the flock and by themselves, but made the rest Jacob set apart the young of the flock by themselves, but made the rest face the streaked and dark-colored animals that belonged to Laban. Thus he made separate flocks for himself and did not put them with Laban's animals. Whenever the stronger females were in heat, Jacob would place the branches and the troughs in front of the animals so they would mate near the branches. But if the animals were weak, he would not place them there. So the weak animals went to Laban, and the strong ones went to Jacob. In this way, the man grew exceedingly prosperous and came to own large flocks and female and male servants and camels and donkeys. This is kind of, so he gets him back, right? He slipped him Leah 7 years ago. And she's, having kids like crazy. He's got 2 women fighting over him. So he kind of gets his father-in-law back, even though he makes his father-in-law more prosperous than he was. But, for those of us in the livestock industry, this is really cool because this is one of the first, selective breeding methods, where he's essentially making kind of like stanchions and breeding the strongest ones and then kind of like cutting out the weaker ones, and they're going to go fend for themselves, breed on their own, but he's not being so selective of the biggest, tallest, strongest, prettiest, or in this case, purebred, not purebred, whatever it is. He's making sure that all the strong ones are breeding each other. And so it's really cool to see that kind of selective breeding. Let's see. I think that's it, guys. We're going to hang it up here. Next week, we'll pick up on chapter 31. So we get to see how Jacob went from traveling to now he's got 2 wives, their sister. Remember, Leah and Rachel. Leah's the oldest. Laban was his mom's brother, and he played some tricks on him, but at the end, Jacob got him back. Ended up with both the daughters, all the grandkids, and like the best bloodlines of his flock. So we're gonna hang it up there, and I'll see you guys next week. Love you. Be safe.